Welcome to the Shutter Saga Podcast. I'm your host, Marvin Blue. Join me each week as we dive into amazing conversations with some of our industry's top leaders. We will talk about photography, business, and most of all, share the stories that have laid the foundation to our journey in this world we call photography. A couple of ways to support the show is to like, subscribe, and share the show with others. Leave those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and if you're a fan of seeing us live, we are on YouTube. Also, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Again, thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show. Welcome welcome all to another episode of the Shutter Saga Podcast. I am your host, Marvin Blue. With me this week is, an extraordinary photographer, a man with an extraordinary story. He is a photographer. He's an author, a business strategist. He's a firefighter. He's a car enthusiast. He is a man of many talents. He's known as the Man in Black for some of us. He is the youngest looking old photographer in the game right now. He looks like he's 22, but he's actually in his 30s. Yep, I put him on blast, and I'm going to do that. But ladies and gentlemen, we have none other than Jeff Rojas on the show. I had to do that. Jeff, what's up, my man? How you doing?
Not too bad. I'm pushing 40, so I'm grateful for the kind words. How about that?
Oh, man, he's pushing 40, but you look like you're 25, and you haven't aged a bit. You have not aged a bit since the day I met you. In fact, you've gotten younger.
It's just the acne. It's the adult onset acne, and I blame my mom for that. Mom, I love you, but
Jeff, so where you at these days, man? I know you've moved around. I know remember last time. I remember you were on the East Coast. I remember you were in Connecticut at one point. Where you at these days?
I still live in Connecticut. I'm 90 miles north of New York City, in a small town of about 1,200 people, a single stoplight, and just a little community of artists from the early 90s who decided to. Well, the town's been here for more than that, but that's what the town is really known for is being a community of artists, which is pretty awesome.
Nice. So I'm assuming you just fit in well, just like fitting like a glove when you moved out there.
No, not at all. I'm 6'3" Hispanic, and the Hispanic population it feels like it's me for 95% of the time. So definitely an oddity for the town in terms of like demographic of person, to say the least. I stick out like a sore thumb. Most of the people here, I was looking at the statistics the other day, I think it was like 52 or 53% were between the ages of 55 and 65. Like it's obnoxious. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna figure out the exact statistic because I pulled it. I was like, I literally stick out like a sore thumb. So for the sake of this conversation, so you can laugh, the actual statistic is 0 to 5, 2.2%. 6 to 11, 2%, 12 to 17, 3%, 18 to 24, 10%, 25 to 34, 7%, 35 to 44, which is where I fit in 8.4%. Anything above that is 22%, 18%, 5.5. So it's like 50+% of the population is over the age of about 44.
Nice. So yes. So being a 6'3" Hispanic man in a small community, you're everyone's friend on Taco Tuesday. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much. And it's funny enough, you have a Taco Tuesday here, as weird as that sounds.
We have Taco Tuesday everywhere. But man, so like looking back at it, you and I, we met, I want to say 2018, 2017-ish? Ballpark, ish. But I remember you obviously from the teaching circuit. You were an instructor at Shutterfest. You were on the main stage. You were, just bringing a wealth of knowledge. You were known for, at the time when I remember, was just these beauty portraits that were second to none. And it was like, if you think you're good, look at Jeff's work. And then obviously, it evolved to you doing so much commercial work and just everything. Basically, you were the blueprint of success in the early days when we were coming up. Like, dude, what is Jeff? Jeff's doing it all. How do we follow that model? But tell us about the early days, man. When did you pick up a camera?
I'm 23, 24 years old. First of all, let's go back. I appreciate the kind words. At the end of the day, it often doesn't feel that way. But I was working in a place of survival, and I'm grateful for the kindness because, again, from a personal note, it's hard to feel those things as you're in that moment. But picked up a camera, 23, 24 years old, from B&H. Picked it up for like $400 because that's all I could afford. And kind of built up going to workshops at that point, assisting at workshops at that point, getting a chance to meet people in the teaching circuit, getting a chance to meet photographers who were working day in and day out. And that kind of kicked off a path for me. Little did I know that that was going to eventually evolve into a career.
Okay, so who was the early influences for you when you were starting out and everything? Who kind of got the buzz going for you when you were looking at it and just was like, "What? This is why I want to do this." You know, who are your heroes, so to speak?
So I know this is going to sound a little obnoxious, but not many, if any. I wasn't really looking up to people in terms of name or brand or any of those things. I would pick and choose things from people I would meet. So I'll give you an example. I was an assistant for a workshop because I could attend the workshop for free effectively if I was an assistant because I couldn't afford to take the workshop if I had to pay for it out of pocket. So that person was Lou Freeman, who
Okay.
photographed Playboy for like 25 years or something like that. And
Mm.
her experience and wealth of knowledge of working in the 80s and 90s was incredibly valuable, and getting a chance to see how, as a woman, she stood up and did something incredible that had not been seen before. But more so than anything, the way her mind worked in terms of art and how her lighting and design, like getting a chance to meet people like that, getting a chance to meet folks that I wouldn't have had a chance to otherwise unless they were on the teaching circuit to build that. People that I had looked up to their quality of work, Joel Grimes comes to mind specifically because I'd never heard of a composite before when I first started. Like that was new to me in terms of artificial backgrounds and imposing a person on an artificial background and getting to see how seamless that looked at that time and how amazing that was. And that caliber of work really resonated with me. But I didn't necessarily know Joel's name until he became a colleague and a friend eventually. And getting to realize like the person that I had considered a friend was the same person whose work I had seen years before that and thought it was beautiful. And I thought that was a really seamless transition. So I didn't fanboy over anyone. It was really organic in terms of a start.
Okay, nice. And then when you first started, what were you? I guess what were you known for? What did you consider yourself as? What kind of photography or genre were you?
I was a car photographer. I picked up a camera to start documenting a car I was restoring. I had a 64 Impala Super Sport. Wanted to show it off in a couple forums and document the process of restoring it, and share that online. And that passion for the car eventually turned into photography. So I started pretty much just photographing cars. I remember doing like car event days and car shows and bringing my camera to all sorts of swap meets or like car meets, or I even set up a day along, this feels like an eternity ago, but setting up a day where we did portraits of models in front of cars at one point and collaborating with other photographers. So car photography eventually evolved into learning more about light, into fashion and portrait photography, and then evolved from that point. But it was cars. It was cars, and I wasn't good at it. I will argue that it's probably the worst of my work. Even going back to it, I think it would still be subpar at best, if that.
Nice. So when did you? Okay, so starting at 23, and you're now you said 36, so 13. So 13 years ago. When did you start? I guess when did you start feeling like your ascension began? Because I mean, for me, it's like the teaching aspect. That means you were already teaching probably with 2010. You were, or 2010 is when you got started. You were already teaching like when I first started in 2013. So like your name was already getting circulated early in my career. So when did I guess you start? When did your ascension begin, and kind of when did you go into the education space?
So from assisting, let me take two steps back. I love helping people. That's my
Okay.
core basis is, even in high school, I was always the person that I'd sit in the back of the class and I would understand things and really simplify them for my peers. And so if you
Yep.
went back to high school period and you went to algebra all the way to any type of AP classes, I could take that information and somehow regurgitate that in a simplistic way to help my peers just understand the data, right? Like I just made it easier for them to understand at the end of the day. And I loved that. And what I felt was when I went into the photography community, a lot of things were over complicated. And that bothered me in terms of the learning capacity of it, because I'm like, this doesn't need to be so complicated. And so when I was assisting, I realized that a lot of the attendees would have issues with trying to learn lighting or trying to learn design, but I understood that information. So I would just help them and guide them through that process. So I think organically what winds up happening is as you start assisting people and wanting to share that with people, and then you start really attaching yourself to instructors, you see the value of being able to speak in front of a larger audience and help people. And it really came from the want to help people. And I think that really came out in terms of my presentation and my style and the way that I wanted to help people and the way that I wanted to build that community. So I think it was a byproduct of wanting to serve others.
Nice. So when as you were transitioning into education, obviously you started out, like you said, you were assisting and everything. What was it about, I guess, beauty portraits? I mean, because that's where, like I said, when you came across my lab, my first experience actually with you, I want to say was when I was in the I want to learn as much as I can who's out there, and I would go do things like Amazon, look at photography books, go to Barnes and Nobles and grab books. And I remember seeing your name. I guess I'm gonna be all over the place with this line of questioning. So when did the author come out as well? Because I mean, you've like worn so many hats simultaneously. So I mean, from teaching to being a photographer, doing commercial, being performing at a high level, then also being an author as well. So like, walk us through that. I guess your first book was what, 2016 or was it 2015-ish? Because
to be candid with you, I don't remember the year at this point.
Okay.
It sounds like a cop out. It might have been 2017, I believe.
Okay.
But we'll go from that point. So if we were to go to the transition of things, I picked up my first camera at 23. The next couple of years, I was really studying my craft and trying to build on my craft and learn those things. Mm-hmm. And I started taking lighting classes and figuring out what that looked like. I was a studio manager for another photographer for a bit, and she was an instructor, and she was traveling the United States as an instructor and trying to teach fashion photography. And I had a lot of admiration for her craft as well, and helping her build her business and her brand. That was a part of it, and being behind the scenes for that. But while she was out teaching, I was shooting in her place for her clients, or the people that she was hiring. Most of them were pro bono work. She would do editorial work for XYZ publication or magazine or things like that. So while she was out teaching a class in front of 30 people, I would do an editorial for her in her place. And that was the first time that I wound up getting published in Elle, was because she disappeared to go teach and I shot in her place. And as a photographer, as you know, you pick up the camera, it's your work now at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. So while I was shifting, pivoting, and directing the team and figuring out like, this is the way I would pose it, this is the way that I would light it, this is what I would do, I got credit for those things. And that's really started building up my name and my brand. So Elle wound up being my name, not hers, because even though I'm shooting in her place, it's still my work and it's my craft, and it's my lighting and my design and my vision. And that really cemented where I wanted to go. But the resources that I had available to me, my team, really helped guide me in that direction. I worked alongside an amazing makeup artist for a long time, Grisel Rosario. She's such a sweetheart. And she would kind of hone me into this specific direction because it was her needs of what she needed. So she would do beauty and portraits and things like that. And in the serving aspect of things, I would figure out how to best align with my team and what they wanted to go ahead and build and create towards. So it was a really collaborative, organic way of working with people and trying to move forward. And while I wish I could take all the credit and say it was like my design, my concepts, that could not be further from the truth. It was really us coming up with a vision, and me with her experience. She is older than I am. She must be in her mid 40s at this point. She understood working with artists in the past and building connections and things, like where she wanted to go with her craft. And she kind of just pulled me along with her. And I was grateful for that, because she didn't have the lighting expertise that I did, and she didn't have the composition, the way that I would compose things or the way that I would edit things, but she had a vision, and she became almost a photo editor or director on set. And I learned a lot from her. And I think that really helped start guide my career as a whole. So to say I owe my career to my team and the people that were around me.
Okay. Did you run into like any early roadblocks or struggles when you first started out, or did a lot of the stuff? I mean, because obviously you put in a lot of the work as you were building and learning, but did you experience those struggles early on?
In a wide variety of different gamuts. So let's start with the editorial side of the business. I would often, so in the editorial space at that time, for you to pitch an editorial, you had to send out a proposal effectively. And there were oftentimes I didn't get an answer to a single email. And I would send out like 70, 80 different publications. At the time, there was just a bunch of like online publications that you could submit to. And what I realized was I wasn't getting an answer. And so I started getting really catty when people started not answering emails and be like, well, somebody else picked it up, right?
Yep.
Just to keep them in the light of you weren't picking it up, so somebody else did. And oftentimes it wasn't even true to that publication. But it was my way of saying, you may not have seen my value, but somebody else did, right? So that was one aspect of things. And eventually my work got better and my team got better, and it was easier to have those contacts and connections, and people started answering my emails. So that was one roadblock. In the teaching circuit, my roadblock was there was a very old school, you have to pay your dues before you're able to stand on that stage. And I think that there's merit to that to a degree. However, like I think if you're going to teach about running a business, you should be able to own and operate a business, right? You can't come from a place of theory. But when it comes to the amount of time, I want to know what's happening today. I want to know what's happening in the market today. If I'm trying to learn something, I don't want to learn from someone who did it 20 years ago, right? There's a sense of urgency when it comes to wanting to know how people are doing things today. And so paying my dues to certain people in the industry and key leaders in the industry meant I had to go through a teaching circuit. And that looked like going to individual cities that I would probably not want to go teach in front of 5 people so I can have enough quote unquote merit and experience to go teach in front of 100 because of some arbitrary perspective, right? That was one thing. The advent of online education changed that narrative because I can go in Creative Live as long as I could pitch an idea and sell classes, for example, and I didn't have to jump through any hoops because it was interesting and it was something that could sell to a larger audience. That helped me work through that as well. I mean, there's always going to be hiccups and challenges, but it's about like, how do you figure out how to navigate through those in a way that's going to help drive you in the right direction that you want to go?
Nice, nice. So, I mean, you talk about what was your version, I guess, early on of paying dues? Because I know you went through it. And you were in a part of the circuit before the people that I guess, the mainstays that we know of today. Because I remember the conversation we used to have years ago when we kind of to go piggyback off of what you said. If you're going to teach about running a business, you should be able to run a business. I remember you mentioning that about a photographer that was teaching about wedding photography, but hadn't shot a wedding in over 2 years. And you kind of said it, and the thing is, you did it very casually, and it wasn't like a call them out and like blow up their spot, but it was like just a casual like point of fact that the way you did it, which I always appreciated you for that, because it was one of those, the wool was pulled over everyone's eyes until it got brought to everyone's knowledge. Like, oh, this person hasn't taught or hasn't photographed an actual wedding in over 2 years. Why are they teaching a seminar class about wedding photography based off of stuff they did a couple of years ago? And everything is just changing. So it's very prevalent to that. But what was your version of, like, I guess, paying the dues? Because you were at that point, you were the younger guy on the scene. And a lot of the instructors at that time were in that era. I would say in the 2010s, the young instructors were frowned upon. It was still that, I guess you had to have the gray hair, and the years in, you had to have that 20 years in the game before you could even be considered an instructor teaching.
My pain points were with specific people that I needed to prove wrong.
Okay.
And I am of the ilk that I don't care who's in front of me and who tells me I can't do something in business. If you tell me that I'm incapable of doing something, I will make it my mission and my lifestyle to go do that thing. I've always been that person. In I think it was 2015, 2016, when I started writing my first book, I started writing it because someone told me, as a matter of fact, the person that I considered a mentor told me that I would never amount to anything because some personal issues between her and I. And I wrote 2 books that same year. So it must have been 2016 into 2017,
Yep.
photographing men and photographing women, as a giant middle finger to that person, right? Because that's just my personality type. I will always look at those situations, and someone who's standing in front of me saying, like, this isn't possible, that's their boundaries and that's their limitations. That's not mine. So in terms of people trying to stonewall me, I always found a solution to get around that person or do what I needed to do. And I was never one to try to burn bridges, but it was one to try to figure out the best way possible to make my situation better. As a photographer who was younger in that time period, a lot of eyes were focused at me, and there were some amazing people that knew my name who shouldn't have cared about who I was. And I'll give you an example. Greg Heisler is an amazing photographer. He shot for GQ. He did commercial photography. He's been on the teaching circuit for years, but he's a real working photographer. And he has a breadth of knowledge that I can only dream of having, right? In terms of the business and his impact as a whole. And I get into an elevator with him at some point, and we're in another country. We're on the same teaching circuit. And he looks at me. He's like, "Hey, Jeff," and I was like, "You know my name, right?" And so I latched on to people like that, people who wanted to encourage the next evolution of speaker. And that for me today is like the YouTuber, right? Because at the end of the day, like, that next evolution is the person teaching YouTube videos. And after that, it's the person creating TikTok videos or Instagram reels, or like, those are people who that evolves. You should never try to stonewall those people that are coming after you. You should encourage that and that growth. And so I aligned with people who wanted to see me do well, and quickly figured out ways of moving away from people who didn't have my best interest out.
No, I totally get it. I remember, I guess, man, I want to say it was maybe 2019, that pivotal conversation in Vegas where I was still in a stage of where, like you, I had that chip on my shoulder, and it was to prove people wrong because, you're not going to last, I'm not going to know your name in 6 months. You're not going to be here past 5 years, whatever. Good luck, kid. And at that point, I was really coming into my own, rebranding myself, really getting my sea legs underneath me. Having my why, because at that point, we had the third kid, and she was 2, and at that point I was a full-time photographer, and asking about, like, in that stage of, like, am I ever going to be good enough to make this much money for a wedding? Because my bread and butter was still weddings at the time. I wasn't branching out. I was so singular focused with weddings, but I was bubbling myself, thinking I could never get past making this much per wedding. Am I ever going to break into that? And I remember those conversations, but the chip on the shoulder, man, that's, some people look at it as a bad thing, but I've always looked at it as motivation. Sometimes I like having that chip on my shoulder. It makes you better. It pushes you, sometimes to destroy your bubble and destroy your box, and to think outside the box and go for things a little bit more. And then when the dust settles, you realize how much further you went because of that. Did you ever, I guess, get to a point where maybe that chip on your shoulder might have consumed you? Or, because I know it can be a motivation, but it also could be a determinant as well.
I want to say that I've never put myself in a situation where I was like, "Do you know who I am?" I
Yeah.
can honestly say that that's never happened to me, right? Where I was like, "Do you know who you're speaking to?" And here's why. I think a lot of us fear failure, and so we have this imposter syndrome that we go through. As much as a bravado as I've had throughout the course of my career, a lot of it has been kind of masking insecurity at the end of the day, right? When I didn't feel enough, I would find ways of puffing out my chest to feel better, because that helped me drive things. But at the end of the day, I never saw a necessity to look at someone and belittle them, because at the end of the day, I felt small and I had to puff out my chest. Why am I going to make someone feel lesser than to puff my chest out? Like that doesn't make sense to me, right? In terms
Yeah.
of my integrity as a person. I look at the people that I've burned bridges with in the past. A lot of it has been, oftentimes, I would say 99.9 is to get them out of their shell. I have had assistants who said, I want to be a photographer, and who show up an hour or two late on set, who can't tell you what a lighting modifier is. If I grab a zoom reflector or a beauty dish, they couldn't tell me the difference of one or the other. I've told those people, then you don't have what it takes to be a photographer. But that's not coming from a place of ego. That's coming from a place of reality, right? So I've always been kind to people in that regard. In terms of having a big head, you will look at photos of me in the past, even if it's signing an autograph of something, and you can visibly see how uncomfortable I am. There's no smile from ear to ear. And oftentimes, if I've ever had a smile in a photo, you can genuinely see, like, if you know who I am as a person, you know that's not my genuine smile, right?
Yeah.
Because I've never had that ego trip. I've asked people to keep me here, right? Like level, and not let me be those type of people. The person that I had considered a mentor was that person, and still is that person, from my understanding. And it's not who I am. It's not who I want to be. So I don't let that get to my head.
Nice. Yeah. I'd say you've always been very humble over the years. Like, you never, again, I've seen you take time, hour-long conversations with just the most random photographer, giving advice, hearing their stories, giving perspective. So I mean, you've always been appreciated in that regards. But to change pace here, commercial photography, something that, like I said, this is where Jeff really Jeffed it, as we call it, and like, there's commercial photography, then there's people who think they're in commercial photography, and then there's you stand above with just a select few that you are known for commercial photography. Tell me about the transition, or the ascension in that one. And it, really a question that was asked by one of the subscribers to the show: how does someone break into commercial photography?
It's a great question. So we're specifically speaking about selling product with your images. And okay, I have a business background. I don't have a business degree. I have a business background, meaning I worked as a regional sales manager for a company prior to becoming a photographer. So I had some level of sales experience going into selling work. The value that you bring as a photographer in the commercial industry is helping sell product. At the end of the day, if you can't sell product, your images can't sell that product, you have no benefit to the client, right? So there's an ROI component to that. I want to help this company. So let's say it's a t-shirt manufacturer. If I can help them capture the right t-shirts to help them sell products, I guarantee they'll hire you again. But oftentimes we as artists focus on the creative side so much that we forget why they hired us in the first place. So when I was pitching clients, my job was to make sure they understood that I understood that goal. And so I would walk into, let's say, an agency within here in New York City or Hartford, Connecticut. I can walk into an agency, show them my portfolio of work, and say, would love to figure out how to work alongside you guys. My previous clients have seen an increase in sales based on some of the images that we've taken. We design a image based on what the needs are of the customer, positioning that right golden content to create the right image that will help you sell more product, and that's going to help you do X. And like, those are the conversations I started having with clients, and the conversations were different. I can remember I went to a client, and this was based off a recommendation, at a friend of mine who had an agency reach out to him, and it was a manufacturing agency. And they wanted to hire a photographer for an editorial. And I think their budget was like $3,000 or something like that for the total shoot. And they were a large manufacturer. Like, they created products for large brands, and they were a third-party brand. And when I listened to their work and what they were trying to build towards, I realized very quickly that they were trying to put together the wrong thing, right? So their primary demographic of person they were trying to sell to or appeal to was Asian American men using a specific set of clothing and using a specific marker of income and wealth, right? Like you want that demographic of person that's who they're trying to appeal towards. But most of the people they were trying to hire as models were not those people. And when I helped them make that correlation together and made that recommendation, it kind of like clicked with them. And so they went back to the drawing board and realized the value that I brought to the table from a directive or directing position where I could say, if you're going to photograph for Asian American men, you should probably have Asian American men in your photos. If you're trying to reach a specific income bracket, let's figure out the demographic of person. Who are your like personas? Who are the companies that are your competitors? What are they marketing like? What are they putting together? And then it became a creative production as opposed to me just taking images. And the value of that went from $3,000. I believe the total, and please don't quote me on this, but I believe the estimate was about $30,000 versus the $3,000 when we first went in there. And that allowed me to hire my good friend. That allowed me to hire a couple of assistants and such on set. But I made a lot more money because I could convey the value that I brought to the table. And that just started by being able to understand what the client was trying to do and help them get there and help them find that vision. And so we often in the photography industry talk about in-person selling. That's my version of in-person selling, helping that client really understand the vision and understand what they're trying to execute on and get them there. And I become a director as opposed to an order taker, and being I'm more proactive instead of reactive in that regard.
Okay. And if somebody wants to break into commercial photography, what would be, I guess, those first 5 things you would kind of want to do, or, what would be I don't want to say the term shortcut, but, somebody walks up to you like they always do, Jeff, I want to kind of break in and do a little bit more commercial work. What can I do, or how do I get started?
The easiest way, and I've said this for 10 or 15 years, and I've only had 2 people out of the thousands. And my first class on Creative Live, we reached 35,000 unique people over the course of that time. So I want you to know that this is tens of thousands of people if we just take that class into account. And I've said this same thing to the same audience, and only 2 people have come back with, I've done this. What is stopping you every time you drive down the road and you see a photograph and you go, that's horrendous, and it's a billboard for an attorney, for example, and you're like, I could do better than that? Stopping and calling them and saying, my name is so-and-so, would love to figure out how to work with you guys. I'm a photographer based in so-and-so area. I specialize in this. This is what I would love to do for you. You get more inbound calls if we align and help your audience realize that you're more approachable compared to what the images look like now. You necessarily don't want to call somebody's baby ugly, but the point here is there's plenty of opportunity if you're just open-minded, right? My first gig as a photographer meaning a paid gig, was for Harley Davidson, specifically a franchise in New York City. So because they're franchise locations and such. What I realized is they were opening up a new location. At the time, I was primarily shooting video. And I reached out to them because I knew they were opening up the new location prior to them even realizing that they needed the commercial shot, right? They hadn't even planned for that yet. But I knew that option was available to me because they were opening up a new place. There's opportunity everywhere. If you see a sign that says business now opening, that business probably needs imagery. If there's an ugly photo of a random person on the side of a wall, call that company. Don't necessarily, again, do not call their baby ugly, but let them know that you exist, right? All it's about is being proactive instead of reactive. And I think most photographers fear talking to people when the worst thing that someone can say is no, right? And I've heard no 1,000+ times throughout the course of the last year, let alone my lifetime, right? So, okay, how do we go on from there? Call the next person or try again next week. I guarantee that person's not going to remember you.
Yeah. Now, not to disagree with you, but I'm all about the truth. So yes, I'm going to advocate you call that baby ugly, because some people just need to hear the truth, and we don't need false sense of security as that baby gets older and becomes an adult. They think they're cute. Like, you weren't called ugly enough as a kid, and I blame your parents for that.
You should. I get it. I just, there's my gentle hands in terms of people. People tend to spend a lot. What I think as I'm getting older, I'm realizing how insecure people genuinely are.
Oh yeah.
Genuinely are. And I know there's humor and satire there, but there's photographers that will take that approach, and I guarantee you're not going to find success.
Yeah.
And it's often because you're just burning bridges left and right, and people won't remember you struggling through that initial phone call where you're like, "Hey, we'd love to figure out how to work with you," but I guarantee they'll remember the person that's like, "You suck," and they're like,
Yeah.
"Check mark, I'll remember you for next."
I don't mean it, everyone. That just is me joking as always, because I never take things serious. But I take enough things serious that I can joke about the other stuff that isn't, meant to be so serious, But yeah.
As you should.
Exactly. But so like, I mean, your growth has been, honestly, like, it's been amazing, just like over the years of your transitions. I've seen, like I said, I've seen you when you took the break, quote unquote, the break from photography, where really everyone's like, he quit. I was like, no, he just took a break. You went, I guess you went radio silence for a while, and then you came back and you were still just as strong. So let me ask you this: what's kept you motivated over the years, through everything?
I spent. Let me preface this, and this is my advice to anyone listening, even to you. This is I preach this every single day. Um, I spent 10 years of my life behind a camera, sometimes working 100 plus hours a week at minimum. Okay. There were times in my day where I would wake up at 10 a.m., work all day. I would write from midnight to 6 a.m., send out my emails, go to bed around 6:30 to 7, and then wake up again at 10. So that way all my emails were answered. That is not a tenable lifestyle for happiness or success.
Yeah.
I lost a lot of time with my loved ones. I had 10 years of people going on with their lives without me, right? And that's a sacrifice that you make for success. Everything that I do, doesn't matter what it is, comes from a place of survival. And I think that's what people don't recognize or realize is I do the things I do because that's how I know how to survive, right? So if I'm working 100 plus hour weeks, it's because my body feels like that's what I need to do to survive and to thrive. There's no ego there. It really is me trying to survive and thrive. I've had to learn how to scale that back and really be present in the moment and figure out how to capitalize the most out of my 168 hours I have a week to be successful. And so when it comes to ambition, I think what people get to see is the survival side, and you get to see the results of that survival. Not necessarily because I'm like, what's the next thing? How do I need to do it? And I've been that person, but that person is trying to survive and thrive. At the end of the day, survival comes first. And if I could survive, then there's the thrival aspect of just that little extra. I also have ADD, ADHD, whatever politically correct term it is used today. And my mind has 1,000 different thoughts a day. And there is a storm consistently brewing in my head. And my job is always to navigate all those thoughts and ideas and figure out what's going to help me do the thing that ultimately I want to go ahead and accomplish, right? I'm grateful, whether you believe in faith or not. God has given me an assortment of wonderful blessings throughout the course of my life. And so in that I have appreciation for those things. When I'm thinking about the things in life, everything that I've ever wanted, material or otherwise, has manifested itself because I had a clear vision for what I wanted, and then I figured out how to put the work in. And it might not have been today, it might not have been tomorrow, it might not have been a year or two from that point, but whatever I wanted to begin with has paid back tenfold. There's oftentimes like, it's so stupid, but I wanted a motorcycle. I remember being back when I was in my 18, 19-year-old phase, and I couldn't afford one. And I had this thought process. I was walking somewhere at the age of like 27, and I walked into a coffee shop, and there was this beautiful motorcycle I had sat on. It was a Harley, and I was like, man, I can't wait to get one of these one day. I'm gonna do this. And 2 years later, the bike that I bought was better than the one that I had sat on. because it stood in my head. That's a small example, and it's a very materialistic example, but anything I've ever wanted, be it friendship, be it tangible or intangible, has always paid dividends because I've had faith. And I'm not talking about Christian faith. I'm talking about faith, like general faith that thing will happen. But I think the thing about faith is faith is walking as though it is promised, right? And if it is promised, that means I'm working towards that specific thing. So I'm not just sitting around like hoping for that thing to happen. I'm actively working towards that specific goal in small steps, knowing that in the future it's going to happen. And that's the manifestation of things. A little biblical, but at the same time, if you believe in manifestation, from a worldly perspective, it's how I lived my life for 10 plus years.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also in scripture where it says faith without works is dead. So you could sit there and dream about it, but again, and to me, I think it's a testament of your early days, kind of same with mine. We did what we could to learn. We didn't just sit there and say, I want to learn photography. I want to learn to get better behind the camera. We volunteered. We gave up our time. We gave up our energy to other photographers. We learned from anyone that was willing to teach us, whether it's one lesson or 100 lessons. We watched hours of Creative Live and YouTube, and, we borrowed, a friend's classes from a Creative Live because I was that guy that couldn't afford all the classes. So I was like, who took that class? Can I see your login, and can I get that class and watch it? And, did whatever it took. But, again, the result was we become, who we aspired to become or who we dreamed about because we saw that vision. So,
I think it's important. It's important to your point, find a route towards like whatever you need to do the thing. As long as you're not stepping on anyone's toes or you're hurting anyone, figure out what you need to do to survive and thrive. One of the analogies that I give people, especially if they come from a poor family, is regardless of kind of income level, there's a point when you don't think that you can pay rent or your mortgage, and somehow you find a way to make it happen. Like somehow you survive and thrive. That's how you need to live life every single day as a working creative or running any business, right? The second you feel comfortable, that's when you fail. And I think that, from a biblical perspective, throughout all of Proverbs, it literally talks about that, right? Working and being quick with your hands and being tactful with everything. Those are things that are important. And that's with anything in life. If you're willing to work for it, it'll happen somehow, some way. Maybe not even the way that you think it's going to happen. It often turns out better than it was.
Yep. Nice. So how have you over the years evolved? Because like I said, you've worn many hats. You've been in multiple genres in the industry, beauty, commercial, fashion. And then again, the teaching side, being a lighting guru or someone that's really, proficient. Like how have you evolved over the years to kind of stay on top of your game?
I love learning new things. By the way, I'm going to reset my camera in case you decide to use it. Give me 3 seconds. I apologize.
Okay. No worries.
If it works, it works. If my face is messy, I'm sorry, I'm blurry. My camera decided to do what it wanted to do. I digress.
And that's a shame because that face is just gorgeous, by the way. Just as always. Ageless wonder, you ageless wonder.
It blurred out all the acne, which is great.
There you go.
when you start thinking about your craft, for you either evolve or die, right? And so it's not a comfortable thing to hear. Like, for example, when AI generated art started being really popular, everyone freaked out. Like everyone as an artist freaked out. We're all losing our jobs, right? That was like the first gut reaction. And that's just not true. I mean, if I look back, and this is to answer the question in a historical context, seamstresses back in the Industrial Revolution, prior to the Industrial Revolution and machines being a thing, handmade everything. And all of them lost their job. Most of them lost their jobs because of the advent of technology, right? And the sewing machine and fast development. And we can go on for days of how it being offshore to China, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and all the rest of that. I digress. The point of that is many people had to transition into either new work or find creative solutions with the skill sets they had. The entrepreneurial minded ones decided, I'm going to leave this environment and I'm going to use the same tools that I have and the same skills that I have. I'm going to charge more for it. So maybe I'll open up a bespoke suit shop where we're just hyper focused on designing and sewing men's suits for more money. And they were making more money. That's the entrepreneurial mindset. The difference is they now have risk on their shoulders. We now have the advent of this new technology, of things like AI, and you start thinking about this new technology and how it affects you. I look at it as a rubric and a template for generating ideas quickly. If you want to come up with an idea quickly and you're in a rut, it's the fastest way to come up with an idea. I'm not saying go rip and replace that creative, like businesses aren't going to rip and replace that creative, because oftentimes the machine does what it wants, right? There's no honing that information, getting consistent outcomes. There's always a guess to it. It's kind of like putting a bunch of ingredients in a pot and hoping it tastes the same every single time, but having different measurements, like allowing the machine to come up with different measurements. There's still the human component to it presently, right? As I'm thinking about evolving throughout my career, I'm always looking at what are people trying to use imagery for? What are they trying to build towards? What are they trying to grow towards? And then positioning myself against that. So the AI comment, that's present, right? That's what's happening today. But when I was first starting off, one of the first things that I was told was things aren't what they used to be. People don't get paid what they used to anymore. And I don't know what that was like. So I could only work in that moment. So when I was charging my day rates, I would charge for what I thought was valuable. And oftentimes that was more than what I was told was possible. Right. So when I went to Lou, for example, I can remember that conversation like it was yesterday. I go, Lou, how much did you get paid back in the day? And she would tell me some egregious number. And I've never known that number as a salary at that age. Right. And she would sell that per image. I was like, I don't know what that lifestyle is like. But then you find a couple years later, you have a $30,000 client for a day and a half of work. Well, how did that happen? Right. That didn't just pop out the blue. So this goes back to the limitation side of things of, you work in the world that you're in, you figure out how to have the vernacular. I know for a fact Lou wasn't having business conversations with people back in her day. Again, respectfully to her, that's not her expertise at that point. She had an agent, she had people working for her. I had to be that person. That was the difference of my time, right? I had to be the agent, I had to be the salesperson, I had to be everything for my image. So you have to adapt to the times. You have to, if you really care about your craft and you care about your business, you have to realize, okay, what does my client want today? Not what it happened like 10 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, but what do they want today? And that's how you stay consistent and relevant. Even as a wedding photographer, I've said this for years. People don't want to know about your wedding photos a month after it happened, because we already know you're having marital problems to begin with a month down the line, right? It's not happy anymore. It's not like in the moment. So if you were trying to compete in the wedding industry, how do you capture beautiful images and make those readily available, right? That's how you compete in today's market, because attention is everything. You have to be able to double down on what matters to people. And if you can focus on thinking in that light of how do I make my customer happy today and how do I speak best to my customer today, that's what matters most, right? Regardless of the time period that you're in. Like, you have to meet your customer. At the end of the day, you're selling a product by selling prints, or you're selling a service as a photographer. How do you best do that today? And that's how you stay relevant, listening to your client, listening to your customer.
Nice. Yeah, man, that was well put.
Thank you.
Nice. So to wrap it up, just because I'm looking at the time, we're getting ready to hit the 50-minute mark. And I do value your time, and I do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with me. And be on the show and everything. What advice do you have for I guess, the new crop or the new generation that's coming in today with all the changes that's being made with the AI, with the education being even more readily accessible than it's ever been? What is your advice on the evolve or die in 2024 now?
I don't think everyone needs to be a professional photographer. That's going to be a controversial topic for sure, but I don't.
Controversy sales. I'll take it. Yes.
I think that there's a lot of people who have a misunderstanding of what it takes to be a photographer and the level of effort that takes. You're a business owner at the end of the day, and you have to understand how to run a business and how to operate a business, and it is tiring. You're everything for your business, from the marketer to the creative to the accountant to every single aspect of your business. If you enjoy photography as a hobby, you don't have to make it into a business. That's the first thing, right? That's my first recommendation. I also, for those people, don't do it for free, right? Don't go out and shoot somebody's wedding for free just because you enjoy photography, because you're inadvertently hurting other people. And yeah, there's a bunch of one could argue that there's unlimited bandwidth for photographers and the value and all those different things, but inevitably, if you love the craft, at least have enough respect for the people trying to earn an income to stand up and say, you know what, I enjoy photography for what it is, for the craft. I don't want to shoot your wedding. I recommend this photographer, and they're trying to work on their craft. That's the first thing, right? The first aspect of things. The second piece of advice is, if you are interested in running a business as a photographer, focus on running it as a business. I know plenty of photographers today that are doing well, not because they're the best photographer in terms of creativity and composition, but because they know how to sell, and they know how to sell well. And I fit into that bucket, right? I think I'm a better business person than I've ever been a creative. So master your craft for sure, but being able to sell your work matters more than being able to learn the perfect lighting technique. It's great that you have great images, but most clients can't tell the difference between good and great, right? So just be good enough for the client and focus on selling. And the third is just have fun. Life is short. We could not wake up tomorrow, right? So try to have as much fun as you can and enjoy the craft. And when you don't enjoy it anymore, move forward. Like, chase the new thing. No one's pinning you down to try to force you to do that thing. Like, be reflective of yourself and put yourself in a position where you enjoy waking up every single day. You mentioned my break before. That's where I was for a long time. I was so burned out that I was like, I don't enjoy this anymore. Like, this isn't fun for me. I'm just doing to do, not because it's coming from a place of health and happiness. Find that place and double down on that, right? That's my TED Talk.
Well, I know I said I was done with a question that was supposed to be the last one, but you said something that sparked me. When you took your break and you took time away, like, I know parts of the story, the parts that I'm privy to know. I never did ask this though. What was it that reignited you after your hiatus or your time away? Because when you came back stronger, in my opinion. So what was that reignited you to come back?
I'm surrounded by good people, right? And what good people do is that they remind you of your value that you bring to the table. I don't think I've ever said this publicly or out loud before, but what I can tell you is, in 2018 to 2019, I didn't have the best people around me. I didn't have people who had my best interest at heart. Oftentimes it felt like I had wolves around me at every given point, right? Who were just either looking for something from me, or looking to take something from me, or looking to take a client, whatever that was. When you have good people in your corner, those people are invaluable, right? Because they'll pick you up and push you forward. I lead from a place of serving. And here's what that means. A good friend of mine who has become a good friend and living in this small town, she owns a business in town. And I helped her repair a piece of furniture that she had. And in that, I learned that I just enjoy serving, and I enjoy doing that for someone else. And her and I had a conversation, and she understood that I enjoy doing good things for other people. And she's like, the way that you speak and the way that you show me things, it's clear that you love teaching and you love speaking and you love building those things. And she goes, you should do that. And I was like, funny story, you should know. And I went on the whole tangent of my history of teaching and such. When I had those types of people around me who reminded me of the good things that I brought to the table, as opposed to, and they had nothing to gain from investing in me in that capacity outside of time, which is the most precious thing in the world. That reignited me as a human being to say, okay, I think that's my purpose. I think that's my calling. So if there's anything that you'll see from me in the future as a whole, it's me leading through example, because that's my integrity, and trying to serve others from a place of sameness and oneness. Like, you and I are equals in my mind and will always be equals in my mind. And then being very astute of the people who have my back because they genuinely want to be good people and supportive, versus who want something from me, right? When I put myself in that position, I realized I enjoyed doing the thing that I loved. I was just around crappy people, to say it mildly. And that just helped reignite that passion, that drive. And here's the thing, I'm not at 100%. This is me thinking about, as I think about the future, small steps forward. Because you have to take those small steps forward to really gain traction. And you don't want to go to 100% again, because inevitably you're going to burn out. But I want to know what that balance is. So right now, that's the path I'm on. It is slow, it is deliberate, it is intentional, and I'm focused on my calling and my purpose and the things that make me happy.
Nice. Well, we're glad that you're back. I'm glad that you're back. And I mean, the industry is better because of it, because of what you bring to the table, the wealth of knowledge. And then honestly, the passion that you have when, I always, anytime Shutterfest would come out and the newbies would, say, what class should I take? I'm thinking about this one or whatever. I had no problem pulling punches. Said, if you want to learn, if you want to be inspired, this guy he'll test you in a way. He'll get in your head a little bit in it, but it's in a good way, because you walk out not just with cool pictures, but now with a better mentality on how you're going to attack the next 365 days after that moment. Where are you going to be at a year from now? And I remember you used to say that was what sparked my inner spark of, like, maybe I do want to teach, maybe I want to do more in the industry. And here we are today. My love letter to the industry is my podcast, and being able to have these conversations and share and tell people, like, look, the people that we love, the people that we respect are humans just like us, and this is just a way for us to become closer with them and to get to learn them, and just not have this think that there's so much distance between where you're at and where they're at and who they are as people. We're all still people, and we love doing this crazy thing called photography.
Amen. It's funny. So throughout the course of my career, people have noticed that, like, if you're around me, I'm pretty quiet and to myself. That's not out of, I don't distance myself because I'm trying to play cool. That's not me. I'm actually an extroverted introvert. And so my capacity for people is very limited. So while I love serving, I also know that at the end of the day, I got to put my air mask back on and like take care of myself. So if you see me by myself, it's often because it's my reset, if that makes any sense. Or if I'm quiet, it's because I just feel awkward in this entire situation, right? Like, that's just who I am as a person. And then I get into rhythm of having a conversation. I get very passionate about what those things are. I say that because when you and I met, I think the first time, I was quiet and kind of clinical about understanding your position and understanding you. And I think people often misinterpret that coldness as, again, trying to play it cool, but it rather is trying to learn who somebody is and trying to invest in that person the best that they know how. Like, you and I met And I realized very quickly you had a lot of passion and you had a lot of drive. And you reminded me of when I was avidly trying to like grasp for every opportunity at once. And I don't know if you remember, but I was like, give it a minute. Like take a second to yourself. Like
Mm-hmm.
focus on the why, right? Focus on the mission. And so don't lose sight of the mission for the work, right? And that was something that I remember preaching to you at that time. Um, and I still double down on that. Like as you go through this entire experience of running a podcast and running a business, and the fact that you can still be present with your kids is incredible. The fact that you have a loving relationship with your partner and you exude it from the mountains is beautiful. Like I love to see those things. And so I've learned a lot from you, and I just want to acknowledge that as well.
No, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, and thank you. I mean, you say you met me when we were having the third kid, and yeah, it's crazy. Like we said, all these years later, now the oldest is in the reserves, and she's getting ready to start college. And you jokingly said, "I can't believe you're still old enough to have kids that age." We had a full conversation about having kids and everything. I always tease you about, all the kids that you don't know about because I always mess with you, calling you you were the original baby faced assassin in this industry, and then I took the moniker, yeah, because I grew the facial hair and it got gray, and I mean, again, you still look the same from the day I met you. You actually look younger, you lucky bastard.
I wish. Every time I look at the photo, I'm like, the crow's feet say otherwise. So there's that.
I don't know what you're talking about, dude. Like literally, we keep talking about this. Like how one of my memories popped up, and I'm like, how do you look younger in 2024 than from 10 years ago? Like, oh, my first experience when I ever taught at this one conference, I'm like, and he looks younger now. I was like, dude, you look young.
Well, I mean, if you want me to be direct, there's 30% of me that comes from this place called Africa. Not that I look it. My grandmother, my grandparents, they're all really dark skinned, right? So they all come from Africa and such. So I'm going to give them the credit. Although I look pale, that's where it's from. I blame my grandfather for the paleness, but somehow like that's so black doesn't crack, but like white black, I don't know what to call it, mixed. Apparently, I'm doing well. I'm not doing my best, but we'll figure that out with a dermatologist.
Nice. All right, man. Hey, thank you so much for your time today, man. I appreciate you as always, man. And I look forward to next time I get to see you. Where can everybody find you at on social media?
Just at this point, just Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
I'm very open to conversation there. That's it. I'm not listen. Also, you don't need 50 Instagram accounts and Facebook accounts. Like, reel it back. Get to basics. I got 2 things you could talk to me on, and I barely use them as much as I probably could.
Nice. All right, man. We'll go ahead. We'll tag all your stuff here in the show notes and everything. But again, appreciate your time, man. Good talking to you, and see you down the road.
I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Oh, actually, I did forget oh my gosh, and I'm glad I looked at it down. Somebody wanted me to ask, what is your next car project? Because I know you always show off the cars and everything, and I know you're out there fighting wildfires in Connecticut and everything, all these crazy things that you do outside of photography. But what is your next car that you're going to work on?
So let me ask you this. How much of a car person are
you? Casual.
Casual. Okay. So I have a 70 Chevelle that I purchased. That was my grandfather's best friend that I'm currently working on, and that's going to take me years to finish the way that I want to finish it. But I have this want to buy a supercar in the next couple of years.
Okay.
And I've been doing my due research on what that looks like in terms of like cost and maintenance and all the rest of that stuff. And that'll be my toy for the future. So I'd say within the next 1 to 2 years, there'll be something in my near future that is that's one of my childhood dream cars for sure.
Okay, nice. I thought you were gonna say something like, "Man, I'm working on this Pontiac GTO or something like that." Would have been cool, but
well, Chevelle is a 70 Chevelle. I mean, are you familiar with Fast and the Furious?
Yeah.
You know the red and black car that he drives in some of the newer movies?
Yeah, and I think he was driving it at the end or the in between part 1 and part 2 or part 2 or 3. Yeah.
So yes, that is the same car. Although that's the trim model, I'm one less trim model than the one that he had for amenity's sake. Fun fact about that movie though, the interior shots were not shot in a 70 Chevelle, and the only reason I can tell you that is his side view mirror is not from a 70 Chevelle. It's from like a 1990s something Accord. Like you can tell that it's a red, newer model. Nerdy moment, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe everything on. I mean, they raced a car in space, so I don't believe anything on Fast and Furious. The only reason I'm sticking with that movie franchise is because it was a part of my childhood, and I have to see it through. I'm waiting for them to hurry up and make the last movie, so I don't have to watch them ever again.
The Brian Super's coming back in the first movie. Is a nose for me. So,
okay.
Brian
Nice.
Super. Who else? Aoki. What's her name? Aoki. Devin Aoki is coming back.
Okay.
From last I heard. So she was just on set with Vin Diesel. So it's cool to see all like coming back.
Yeah, full circle. The people that died that came back alive. I mean, I thought I cheated death, but apparently you can get thrown off of a moving airplane and survive. So.
Well, when the runway is like 20 miles, I mean, what do you expect?
Yeah, I mean, just as long as you go with the momentum and you roll, you should be fine, right?
Yeah, that's what I'll try that. I'll let you know how it works out.
I appreciate it. Yeah, make sure you get it on video or it doesn't count.
The fastest tattoo remover in the world is jumping off an airplane.
There you go. All right, man. Thank you again so much, man.
I appreciate it.
That's it for this week's show. Again, thanks for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, and share with others. Leave those reviews and check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Until then, see you next week.